begin our series today as we're continuing. In fact, we're almost wrapping up the book of Proverbs. I can hardly believe it. But before we get to that, I kind of want to do a bit of a PSA here, a little bit of a public service announcement to talk about the issue of having a virus active and throughout New York City. Now, hopefully, you were able to receive an email from the church that detailed different information about how we are responding as a congregation, including some very practical steps like making sure that all of our cleaning routines are per the CDC's recommended guidelines, that we're using products that are recommended by the CDC, all these different things. You'll experience how we're doing communion a little bit differently, all in an attempt to make sure that we're providing as healthy of a place as we can and as safe as a place as we can for people to come to worship. If you did not get that email, please do fill out a yellow card and drop it in the box on your way out, just so we can be sure to communicate the most up-to-date information, which could include if there's some sort of recommendation from the government for not gathering together, then having just a virtual or live stream service. But we would love to be able to get that information to you as quickly as we can and as efficiently. So if you have not received emails from us, then please go ahead and update that information. Now, besides the pragmatic steps of this, I want to address a couple of things that's my hope for this church in the middle of this situation. Now, it was very interesting kind of looking into this a bit. Since Trinity will be 153 years old this year, when you stop and think about the number of things that this congregation that has ebbed and flowed and changed, and people have come and gone and were born and have died. Over 153 years, this church has been providing a spiritual impact and to be a spiritual guide for this community for a long time through a lot of different things. Multiple different sort of illness outbreaks, whether you want to talk about polio, yellow fever, influenza, through major crises like the Great Depression or 2011, the stock market crash. There's all these different ways that this church has been present and has been a spiritual guide in really difficult times. And so one of the things that I really want us to think about as a community of faith is not simply how do we make sure that we stay healthy and safe. Now, I want you to hear me say, that's a very high concern of ours, and we're taking overly ambitious efforts to make sure that we're providing that. But I have to believe that there is something here for us besides simply keeping ourselves as healthy as we can, and we're doing that. I actually believe that the church has a role in situations like this to be a positive force for good, to be people who display faith, for people who display an uncharacteristic love in a season of anxiety. And so one of the questions we've been asking ourselves here at Trinity is, how do we support our community during this time? Instead of just closing our doors and saying, everybody kind of stay out, what do we do to actually open our doors and open our hearts for the community to provide something that we can uniquely provide that's different from what the city provides or healthcare providers? One of the things that we're going to do, starting on March 18th, we're actually going to be opening up our doors on Wednesday nights, where we are just providing a space for the community to come and find solace in a time of anxiety. It's not a program, it's not an event, there's no tickets to be purchased, but we will provide some reflective classical music and open the doors, communicate with our neighbors and say, if you're looking for a place to come and pray, if you pray, if you don't pray and you're looking for a place just to come and kind of detox or let the anxiety come down a bit, we invite every single person to come and just have some time of reflection and solace in a beautiful space. I had somebody walk up. This happens maybe once a month that I know of, right? Someone's walking down the street and they see the doors open and the curiosity, it just like drives them. And they come in and they go, I'm just so curious what this space looks like. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a young woman who said, I'm not a Christian, but boy, this place just really brings peace. And I tell you, I think that there's something for us in this season to go, how are we actively supporting our community in a difficult season? So one of the practical ways we'll do that will be opening our space for the community to just come and find a space to reflect. We're going to be continuing to think of ways that we can be a positive spiritual guide for our neighborhood in this time. And I would encourage you that this isn't just something that the church with, the official hat on, but that there actually may be a role for you to play in that as well. One other practical way, church, that we can really be salt and light, as we just heard sing, is that we can also be a people who are really thoughtful and careful that we don't take precaution and accidentally fall into prejudice, okay? Now, there's an easy way that you can go, hey, I want to be safe, I want to be thoughtful, and that's important, but we also want to be careful that we're not a people that are falling into prejudice and saying, oh, because you're from this country, oh, because you look this way, or oh, because it's this sort of restaurant, I'm just going to go, no, there must be something inherently wrong, or I need to back off in a way. Church, I really don't believe that that's the love of Christ on display. I really don't believe that that's the life of faith on display. And I really don't believe that God has called us to be a people who are primarily driven by fear. Now, again, there's a healthy respect. We want to be prudent. We want to be practical in our responses. But we don't want to fall into that prejudice. I was reading an article about how many mom and pop Chinese restaurants are on the brink of closing because of just the sheer drop in people who are coming to eat there out of these kind of irrational concerns. Also, and a bit more humorously, the sale of Corona beers has dropped dramatically. Even though, to be clear, there is no logical connection between those two. There's no connection, okay? Just to be clear, people. And so, if that's a concern of yours and you have a gift card to a restaurant that you're fearful to go to, I want to love this church well, and so you can just give it to me. I will be happy to take it. Now, all things aside, church, I really hope and pray that as we journey through this season, whatever it ends up being, a really big thing, not as big of a thing as we thought, that we do it well. Because actually the life we live is meant to be lived by faith. And there'll be seasons where things are really easy. There'll be seasons where things are really difficult. But in each one of those, we believe that God is good and he has an amazing, unique grace for his church. And that is what we want to put on display. Amen, church? All right, I'll put the preaching hat back on here. All right, let's continue with our service today and continue particularly in our series on searching for wisdom. It is a great time to be operating in wisdom. Now, for those of you who are new or guests this morning, we've been walking through various topics through the book of Proverbs and covering what the Bible says is a way to live with wisdom. And we've said this, that it must start here. It must start with the fear of the Lord, or the recognition that there is a God, and that God has created all things, and that God actually has designed the world to work a certain way. That when you are following the ways that God has set the world to work, that you will do better in life. Conversely, when you are going against the moral grain that God has put into the universe, you're likely going to experience more problems. And so there's a way of wisdom that has to start with this recognition of it's God who decides, and I need to both accept and respond to that appropriately. It's got to start there. So we've talked through all these different topics, whether it be about friendship, we've talked about sexuality, we've talked about wealth, money. Today, I want to talk about an incredibly misunderstood topic, and it is the topic of anger. Now, I can tell that I'm becoming more and more of a New Yorker. There's a correlating graph with how comfortable I feel with yelling at cars is also the same as how much I'm feeling like a New Yorker, okay? I feel an incredible amount of freedom to yell at cars after about like 9 months here, right? There's some things that we all experience where we experience anger. I gotta tell you about a really funny situation where I was walking by and there was some cab driver tried to make a turn that he couldn't make, and then he got stuck, and then it blocked all the traffic behind him. And I tell you, I wish I had popcorn for just to watch how this thing was melting down, right? People were getting out of their cars and yelling at each other. This random guy walking by in the street, totally not even involved, just walking by, starts yelling at him, yeah, you should tell him I hate cab drivers. And he's just everybody's just randomly piling on. And here's the interesting thing, right? When we talk about anger, right? There's a lot of humorous anecdotes. But oftentimes, the reality of it is we really tend to misunderstand anger. Okay, and let me give you kind of a couple ways that this goes. On one side, there's this misunderstanding that anger is bad, right? Some people, some of you in this room are incredibly uncomfortable with anger. When someone else around you is displaying anger, you really start to shut down. Your mind goes fuzzy. It's difficult to think. Or when you're experiencing anger, you just have to kind of crush that thing because anger's bad, right? All the way on the other side, some of you are a little too comfortable with anger. It's a bit too much, and you can become, and this is the key, this is important, you can become addicted to anger, all right? And we'll talk about this, because frankly, we're living in a society that is very addicted to anger. It's a rage society, okay? And that's being manipulated for marketing, by the way. So we've got kind of these two sides here, but at the end of the day, what we say is anger's not necessarily good or bad. It's an emotion. It's a wiring that we all have and that we all can experience in a healthy way. In fact, one of the messages that you almost never hear preached on is Jesus and the anger that he shows, right? We almost never preach on that because we kind of in the church have this idea that, everybody's got to be the nice guy, be the nice girl, and you can't be angry because that's not good. And that's really a misunderstanding. And so when we talk about anger, what we're really talking about is this power to do something about a wrong, okay? So anger is something that gives us a power, an energy to be able to either overcome something that's dangerous or to tear down something that's unjust. But anger has its place and its use. However, oftentimes, it ends up spinning out of control and our lives suffer because of it. So not only is anger often misunderstood, both in it's terrible, we should never do it, to I need to live in it 24/7, but we misunderstand its purpose, right? And its purpose is to give us the energy, the strength to overcome that which is wrong or that which is unjust or to be protective, okay? And then when we talk about it in the sense of the things that are around us and how we experience it, we can often find ourselves being manipulated by others. So today I want to talk about anger. Anger is a secondary emotion. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Anger is a secondary emotion, right? That means there's always something that sparks the anger. And oftentimes, if you can identify what that primary emotion is that's going on, it will help you get a much better grasp on your anger. For example, the fear of loss. Okay, I was in a room one time doing some counseling. This was back in Texas, and a guy was just erupting in anger. I mean, screaming, yelling, like knock something off the desk. Just incredible amounts of anger. And I stopped and I looked at the guy and I said, "Are you really afraid that you're going to lose control right now?" And he just went, and sat right down. Because at the end of the day, anger is secondary. So why are we even talking about this? Is this sort of like some sort of a public therapy session that we're doing? Maybe. No, it's not. It's not. No, the reason that we talk about this is actually because Proverbs talks about this a lot. Proverbs has a lot to say about anger because this drive in us that creates a lot of energy, if it's not under control, can actually create a really destructive scenario in your life. And so we're going to talk about 4 types of anger that the book of Proverbs talks about today. And the first type of anger is automatic anger. Let's go ahead and switch what this will be referred to in your text as kind of quick-tempered anger. This is the person who just kind of flares up, right? Proverbs 14:16-17 says this: "The wise fear the Lord and shun evil, but a fool is hot-headed and yet feels secure." You ever known somebody like that? They feel completely right and justified. A quick-tempered person does foolish things, and the one who devises evil schemes is hated. Now, the person who is hot-headed feels like they're in control. They feel powerful. They feel like they're making good decisions, but actually, they're bound to do foolish things, right? Let's look at this next verse from Proverbs 14:29. Go ahead and switch to Proverbs 14:29. "Whoever is patient has great understanding, but the one who is quick-tempered displays folly." If you are experiencing or somebody who when something comes up, your instant reaction is, I hit the rage button and I become angry, right? You feel this sense of energy, you feel this sense of power, and all of a sudden you start taking action. But here's the problem with that. If you're quick-tempered, if it's automatic anger that keeps coming out, that you are actually not in control. That the decisions you're making are not these well-thought-out, well-planned decisions, right? It's, no, I'm going to punch the person in the nose, right? Even though if I stop and think about it and I think, is this going to be good for our relationship? Is this going to be good for my finances? I'm just going to erupt and make these sort of foolish decisions. We're living in a culture that's very prone to automatic anger, okay? Now, here's a confession. I struggle with this, okay? There are times where I'll just get angry at something before I really even stop to think about it. I'll give you a really petty example, okay? This is like honesty time with your pastor, okay? I'm just confessing all this to you. I was at a movie theater and walking, it was like 15 minutes before the show starts. And so I was going out to go get something, and as I'm going, there's this lady who does, the sort of thing where she makes it super dramatic, has to pick up her knees in this fetal position to let me go by, and she goes, super loud, It's look, it's a row of 40 seats. I mean, come on, you're seeing on the end, this is going to happen, but whatever. Go and I do whatever I do, and I come back, and she sees me coming and makes it an even bigger deal, and she goes, "Oh my gosh," just somehow she thought I had to get up and walk past her the first time, but I would magically teleport to come back, and my first response, I stopped right in front of her seat, and I said, "Do you want to say something to me?" Called her right on it. And she immediately went, "No," just turned and did that. And I went back to my seat. You know what I did for all the rest of the previews? I'm sitting there fuming about the situation. I'm not even watching the show anymore, right? Now here's the thing. That sort of automatic anger, did that help the situation? Did that improve my movie-going experience? No. Actually, it was worse. But when Proverbs says that, look, when you kind of have this automatic switch, that I just go and it's a petty thing. Let me balance this, okay? If someone is harming your child and your child is in danger, you better flip that automatic switch. There's times where that's appropriate. But there's a difference between appropriate anger and this sort of quick-tempered, hot-headed, automatic button that happens, and it removes, it literally impairs some of your frontal cortex high-level thinking ability, and you make some poor decisions. And so if you find yourself in this habit, watch out. quick temper can lead you down some really difficult paths. Let's look at this next type of anger. This is such an interesting one, okay? Being addicted to anger. Proverbs 29:22 says, an angry person stirs up conflict. Now, watch the wording here. It's important. An angry person stirs up conflict, and a hot-tempered person commits many sins. Now, this is not a person who is responding to something and becoming angry. What is it saying? This is an angry person who causes problems, right? This is not a person who has a problem becoming angry when something bad happens. This is now a character structure issue that it can go and you can become addicted, and now you are an angry person who is looking to create problems. Have you ever met somebody like that? Right? There are some people who thrive on conflict, and they go around and intentionally stir it up. I remember someone saying, and she was a lovely woman, but she said, you know what? I don't mind stirring up conflict, because whether you're talking good about me or whether you're talking bad about me, you're talking about me. And I tell you, church, there are people who can become addicted to anger. And this is what we have to watch out for. And frankly, this is part of the problem where we have such a raging culture, right? We have only continued to politicize anger and market anger to get the results that we want, and people become addicted to this. There are people who they're not even reading articles now. They're just scanning the comment section to watch the fight go, right? And you're getting really upset about these people who said something that you'll never meet, that probably said it 5 days ago, because they're just reposting the same stuff, right? But we get caught up in this. And you can become very easily an angry person. And part of why I think our culture is addicted to this, because for so many people, their actual life experience is very limited, and people don't have a lot of real relationships. They have a lot of virtual relationships, and so you don't have a lot of strong emotional experiences. And the one that you can most easily tap into from a distance is anger. And at least you can feel something. Honestly, I think that's where it comes from for a lot of our culture and what's going on in the background, right? But you have to watch yourself, okay? Now, remember how there is this incredibly dangerous, destructive thing that's in our city right now? No, I'm not talking about the virus. I'm talking about politics, right? And the vote that's going on, right? This is really interesting, right? I saw a survey that said that 36% of MSNBC viewers, okay, don't raise your hand, 36% of MSNBC viewers are having problems sleeping because of politics. That of those who reported, particularly from the Democratic side, those who reported are experiencing trouble sleeping. Those who had dreams about politics, 96% of them included Donald Trump. On the other side of Republicans, the most dreamed of figures, Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton. Now, I'll say it, politics, I'm never going to talk about or tell you how to vote. You engage your faith, okay? That's what I'm here to encourage you to do. But let me just say this as a pro tip. If you're losing sleep dreaming of Donald Trump or Nancy Pelosi, you kind of need to put the news articles down, okay? You need to just take a breather, okay, people? Right? You can become addicted to anger and the powerful feeling that it brings. But if you become this unthinking, out of control, addicted to it, your life will suffer for it. Let's look at this last section here. Crowdsourced anger. Proverbs 22, this is so interesting, these three verses, 22, 24 through 25. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and yourself get ensnared. Let's look at these next verses from Proverbs 19. A hot-tempered person may pay the penalty. Rescue them, and you will have to do it again. right? That's some good parenting advice right there, by the way. This wasn't in our parenting week, but that's some good parenting advice. In Proverbs 25:28, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Here's the thing, right? Not only is there this sort of automatic anger that gets us in trouble because it's unthinking, it's uncontrolled. There's also this sort of addictive anger where it's just, I find myself almost looking at something to get upset about. And then you become a person who starts to stir up trouble, or you're around somebody who's intentionally combative and creating these negative situations. But then you can also kind of crowdsource your anger, right? And this is a great point for all of us to meditate on in 2020, the election year, okay? We have turned into a nation where one of the number one words used on our news outlets for a headline, do you know what it is? In 2019, slam. It's now the most overused word in a news headline, like so-and-so slams so-and-so, so-and-so tears into so-and-so. It's become this overly dramatic, anger-inducing sort of thing, right? And if you don't watch out, you can be swirled into this thing of constantly being angered. But here's what happens when you do that. You become easily manipulated. A person who's easily angered is like a city broken into and left without walls. Do you know what that imagery means for us? Right? Cities without walls were cities without what? Right? Without any sort of defense. If you're someone who's easily manipulated into anger, you're literally somebody who's just out of self-control and others are moving you around, most often for your vote or your pocketbook. One of those two things, right? So when we talk about this, what's actually the goal, okay? What's the healthy form of anger? It's not this sort of automatic, I just flare up at the car, which I do, but it shouldn't be that, right? It's not this sort of addictive, I find myself, I can't stop to the point where I become the person who instigated it because I need to feel powerful, right? Or this sort of crowdsource. I'm just manipulated with everybody else down the path of rage that whoever has set us on the path. What we're really called to is a controlled anger. Look at Proverbs 16:32. Proverbs 16:32 says this, "Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. He who rules his spirit is better than he who takes a city." Now, for those of you who feel uncomfortable with anger, okay, think about this verse. Whoever has no anger, is that what it says? Whoever is slow to anger. It doesn't mean whoever is calm, cool, I don't get upset, I'm just kind of even-keeled. No, whoever is slow to anger, that means that it is a controlled, thoughtful thing. That person is actually better than the mighty. Some translations will say stronger than a great warrior. Why? Because they're controlling this energy. They're making thoughtful steps to either protect or provide or to defend something, right? That there are times, church, where you should get angry, okay? There are times you should be very angry, but it needs to be self-controlled. It needs to be a sort of anger that you're willing to stop, you're willing to consider the facts, you're willing to understand what's happening, and then you are willing to go out and make change. That there is this sort of, that I am so in control of this, it's giving me this energy and this power that I'm going to make the change that needs to happen, whether that's to defend somebody, whether that's to be able to stop some sort of an injustice. It's this slow, controlled force for good. And I tell you, there's so many people who they hit the instant rage button, right? And then they kind of blow up and get really angry, and then what happens? They do nothing. They do nothing about it, right? They just get angry, they read the headline, they close the tab, and they they go and watch Netflix, okay? What the Bible says is actually anger can be a really good thing. When you read in the Old Testament, God is angry oftentimes over sin and injustice. And this is kind of a fun fact, right? In the Hebrew, when it says God is angry, you know a lot of times what it actually says in the literal Hebrew, God flares his nostrils, right? We translate it as anger. But God is visibly angry at injustice, and he takes action. And those who are wise follow in that example. So when we talk about Proverbs, when we talk about what does it mean to be wise, church, are you comfortable with anger? Are you in control of anger? Because I tell you, there are times where people are going to want to make you angry and are going to want to make you spin your wheels and stay up late at night watching the news, scrolling through things, and dreaming of Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump, okay? May that be far from everybody in this room. Here's my blessing on you all today, okay? May that be far from you and your reality. But you know what, church? There are times where we need to stand up for what's right. And there are times where we do need to be upset over the injustices that are happening, but not this flash in the pan thing, not this manipulated thing, but a slow and controlled sort of anger that propels us to pursue righteousness in all spheres. This year, a year where we will watch anger out of control, may we be a people who are incredibly in control, displaying the heart of God, which includes anger over injustice. As we come for communion today, we're going to do something a little bit differently. Hopefully you saw it on the email, but we are going to continue to invite you to join us for communion today. We're inviting people to come in groups of 4 or 5. We've got 2 stations in the front, 2 stations in the back. You don't need to be a member at Trinity to join us for communion. If you've put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, if you've said, I recognize that because of my sin, because of the brokenness in me, that I'm actually separated from God, but God loved me so much that he sent Jesus Christ to live a perfect sinless life and yet die a sacrificial death on the cross for my sin. And because of that, when Jesus raised from the dead, he offers to us new life in him. If that is a declaration you've made in one form or another, we invite you to join us for communion. If that's not where you're at, and you're here going, not sure what I think about Jesus, not sure what I think about church, we're thrilled that you're here. I encourage you just to sit and reflect on the words that are sung. Now, as we come in just an attempt to provide as healthy of a place as we can, we actually have special communion cups today that's got both the bread element as well as the juice, okay? So they're stacked in the same cup. They're individually sealed. So you'll take one, you'll open just the top first and take and eat of the bread, and then you'll open the second seal and drink of the cup. When you're finished, you can place them in the baskets there. Today, may you mirror the heart of God. And more as you journey through this life, whether it's in an easy moment, whether it's in a hard moment, whether it's a moment that is making you have tears of joy, whether it's in a moment that's making you have tears of incredible anger, may you mirror the heart of God, walking wisely and proclaiming of his goodness and grace to those who are around you. Join us this morning for communion.